Olá, tudo bem? Aqui é o Jorge, mais um episódio de A Case of Distrust, o segundo episódio, enquanto a gente tá nessa pausa do Hollow Knight. E voltando pro jogo, ele dá esse comecinho, esse parágrafo do que a gente tava falando, do que a gente tava fazendo antes. Muito bom, especialmente para episódios que saem de 3 em 3 dias, né? Então, Connor Green had just given me a case that involved his bootlegging. I still wasn't sure if he'd be worth my time. I decided to head to Southern Coffee and consult with Frankie. E outra coisa, tá aí o que a gente tava fazendo. Esse jogo se passa em São Francisco, em 1924. Isso é importante, é pré-depressão, então é crazy years total. E é o auge da lei seca e do contrabando. Então vamos lá. Southern Coffee had a distinct feeling of home. The familiar smell of mold in that old basement was enough to put a grin on my face. Então tá, fala com o Frankie, né? Deve ser esse cara. Frankie tended bar at Southern Coffee. Though it wasn't his place, I never caught a whiff of the real owners. They trusted Frankie to do what he did best. Vamos falar com o brother, né? Grande Frankie. I said hello, Frankie, and was met with a smile and a grunt from Franklin Ernest Conway. Franklin Ernest Conway. He'd been a decent pitcher for the Seals a few decades earlier. Sometimes he'd speak wistfully of those days. Pitcher é uma posição no beisebol. But his arms were much more used to slinging bottles now. Pitcher é quem joga a bola. Então vamos lá. I sat at the bar. You got the spooks, PC? He asked. You're worn as a catcher's mitt. I suppose my exhaustion showed. I won $100 for nothing, and I can't let it go. I told Frankie about the case, the threatening letter sent to Connor Green, how he assumed it was related to his bootlegging, and his suspicion of Redstone Stable School. The story took longer than I'd wanted. Frankie showed genuine interest by asking many questions. When I finished, he threw me the whiskey sour he'd been stirring. I took a large gulp and gave a sigh as thanks. Well, Green's case is better than most of what you're given, he said with some enthusiasm. At least it's not more than of that adultery bunk. Sure, I replied, but I started with a goal in mind. What's the point of helping a man like Green? Frankie clicked his tongue on his teeth. Lawyer or priest, why does it matter? Let me ask you, are the clients you have now the types you want to help? Oi, perdão, tinha uns cachorros latindo na rua. Eu gostei dessas duas opções, elas são uma relação bem diferente. I refuse to admit they weren't. I like my current clients just fine. You're always riled up when backed into a corner alone, but you don't have to fool me as long as you're alright fooling yourself. I sighed and stared down at my drink. Caralho! Frankie mandando só verduras, brother. Vamos que vamos. But my daze was interrupted by the basement door opening then slamming shut. A small blustering woman began marching towards me. She looked younger than 25 and was a few inches shorter than my 5'6". I thought her gray trench coat was too large for that small frame, which was when I realized it was exactly like the one that had belonged to Lewis. Tá nas nossas notas, então tudo bem. She hurled insults at me a while. All I could do was sit and take it until she ran out of gas and started breathing heavily. I set my drink on the bar and looked her into the eyes. I studied her features more thoroughly. It was plain she was a knockout now that she'd finished shrieking. Beyond the latest blush and lipstick, she had the natural soft skin and bright eyes perpetually desired by the opposite sex. While I was eyeing her, she caught her breath and restarted her tirade. I'm the wife of that bum who sneaks into your bed. Eita. Where'd you get that coat? I asked her. What? She said, confused. I don't know, my husband gave it to me. Look, don't change the subject, you floozy. I saw him leave your sty this morning. Cara, essa... Não dá nem pra dizer animação, mas essas gravuras atrás do texto, lindo, cara, lindo. Quer dizer, pelo menos eu tô gostando bastante. And that was when I gathered she was Connor Green's wife. Mrs. Green, I'm a PI, not a homewrecker, and I don't think your husband, in his line of business, would want to bat a dick anyhow. Eita caralho. Dick é de detetive, não é de... Vamos que vamos. Her look was pure incredulity. A woman in that line of work? She questioned. I don't believe it. Prove it. Vamos provar. Será que eu tenho alguma evidência? Eu tenho... eu tenho paper stack. Que é do que eu tinha, né? E eu tenho também as coisas que ele falou. Mas eu vou mandar o paper stack now. I had taken copies of old murder cases from the SFPD records when I'd left. I loved reading through them, even though my own contributions were minimal. At that time, I longed for those types of jobs. The truth was, any work was hard to find for a female detective. Show to her. Mrs. Green, at home I have a giant stack of cases, each one from a separate crime, covering many of the cities across the country. I went into great detail on a few of the logs, especially some of the more famous capers. I study them because that's my job. I still took more coaxing for her to believe me. It still took more coaxing for her to believe me, but eventually she came around. She seemed grateful I'd explained it to her. Apparently she had seen her husband leave my apartment, and distraught, she had followed me all the way to Frankie's basement and decided to confront me. I suppose I lost my head after what I thought I'd seen, she said, and then she began to cry. Caramba, não precisa. Frankie, ever chivalrous to a dimpled girl, came around the bar and held her up. Now that's all right, Mrs. Green. Why don't I hail you a cab and send you back home? She agreed, and they walked together up the stairs. When Frankie returned, I said to him, "You turn night real quick." He snorted a laugh. Oh hell, we can't have that siren in here. With a torture yelling like that, every street bugger would have come to her rescue. Verdade. Mrs. Green is a torch singer? Well, I learned she was Mrs. Connor Green just now when she came in here. I'd only seen her as Lil Fanny, singing lead for the jazz band at the Tin Spoon. The Tin Spoon, I said. Tiny Paul's joint. That's where Green is selling his liquor. Faz sentido, tá tudo ali, tudo na família. Say, you think that's where she met her husband? I laughed. You're the real sleuth, Frankie. He made a sarcastic bow. I shook my head. You're telling me you escorted our little torture out just to avoid a bit of hot water? Frankie flushed and said, "What are you talking about, Malone?" I was never good with emotions, but it was plain that Frankie had instantly fallen for the girl. Ih, o Frankie tá ali de namorecos. Não tá, né? Mas tá querendo, So what if I had more to squeeze out of her? I asked. What more could you possibly want from Lil Fanny? She can't have anything to do with Green's mans. Puta, será? Deixa eu ver se eu consigo contradizer. que eu acho que não. Eu também acho que não tem nada a ver. Será que eu mostro? O casaco, talvez. Mrs. Green wore a grey coat that looked all too familiar. He used to contradict. Did you notice her clothes? That grey trench, maybe? I posed to him. It looked a bit large on her, don't you think? I thought she looked lovely, he said. That trench, I continued, belonged to Louis. Frankie's eyes widened. So that scumbag Green might actually have been closer to your uncle, he exclaimed. Or she might have. Either way, it's not total bunk. I stood up from the bar stool. Não peguei exatamente. What had just happened was quite the ruckus. It seemed like my cue to move along. Vou dar uma olhadinha antes. Frankie had a bone with that old shaker at the end of the bar. I was surprised he hadn't named it. He could sling a mean drink, though he only used the good liquor if he liked you. Frankie liked me. Bom demais. I grabbed the wine bottle on the bar and examined its label. It featured a picture of grapes and the words Sacramento use only. Vinho de igreja. Frankie looked at me with a spark in his eyes. Go ahead, he said. Give it a swig. Claro que eu vou give it a swig. But I grabbed the half-empty glass that had been next to the bottle and swirled some of its contents between my gums. A bit spicy, ain't it? Frankie asked. It's good, I nodded, and gulped the rest down. It'll cost you, he said with a smile, and he grabbed the bottle from me, turning it through his hands. Rabbis charge more than a nickel for this beauty. Only this type of Napa wine is made from that Zinfandel grape. It has a unique aroma. I've been trying to learn more about wine. Seemed everyone knew their stuff but me. I noted what Frankie had said about the origin of the grape as he sat the bottle back on the bar. You don't even drink. Since when do you know grapes? Passou alguém cantando, não sei se você conseguiu ouvir. Since when do you know grapes? I chided. Não conheço essa palavra. Frankie let out a bellied laugh. Some of these grapes are older than you, Malone, and I've known about them since I was a small tot. It's why I'm so good at my job, you know? Frankie sighed. Too bad more folks can't taste them. That woman's league is the devil. The Woman's Christian Temperance Union was now under feminist Frances Willard, a positive force for the suffrage of women. But her staunch support of prohibition, along with the union's massive political clout, irked the very wet San Franciscan public. And she particularly wasn't popular with bartenders. Olha aí, que interessante. Pode crer, não conhecia essa moça, nem essa união cristã, mas muito legal, interessante saber. I turned back to Frankie. Será que eu tenho alguma nota que eu quero falar com ele? Cocktail shaker, wine bottle. Eu vou falar do Redstone Stable com ele e aí eu já acabo o episódio. Green suspected Redstone Stable, another bootlegger who ran a barber shop during the day. I brought up Redstone Stable. He's the man Green pointed you towards, Frankie asked. It's possible he still knows something about this mess. I agreed. I thought about what else I could ask Frankie. Olha, eu não tenho mais nada que eu quero falar pra ele. Acho que por enquanto é isso. E aqui eu vou acabar o episódio também. Espero que você esteja gostando. Um jogo bem diferente de tudo que a gente já jogou, né? Mas eu tô adorando. Eu adoro aventura em texto e jogo muito poucas. Então muito mais uma linda desse jeito. Então espero que você esteja gostando. E até a próxima. Um beijão.